I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Swerzik, and today, to my left, I've got fellow marketeer, fellow elk hunter, Preston Lentfer. Preston, thanks for coming on the show.
Elk hunter, yeah. I guess I've been.
You have been, yep. And joining us digitally, which we try not to do so much, but we had to do it for this episode, we have a much more accomplished elk hunter, been guiding big game for over a decade, knocking on 12 years as an elk guide, but the managing editor of Peterson's Hunting, Colton Heward. Colton, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, fellas.
Yeah, well,
he's probably
accomplish is a loose term as well.
You've seen a lot more
whose
elk.
eyes you're looking at it through.
I've seen a lot at the dirt.
That's true. Well, and growing up where you grew up in the Golden West, if you will, elk hunting is so much more of a part of the culture where us, out here on the prairie or everybody east of us in the U.S., it's just not as much of a every year kind of thing. So we just get exposed to it less, but that doesn't mean we're not passionate about it. And it doesn't mean we don't try to get after it absolutely every time we can. So I wanted to set the stage a little bit because we're mid-August right now.
Yeah.
Mid-August. So some of those archery tags are going to be opening up here soon, and it's going to be hunting season before we know it. It was in the 60s, unrelated to the podcast. It was in the 60s.
I'm wearing a flannel.
Yeah, all weekend here in Nebraska. And coming out of, those triple-digit late July, early August days, yep, it was very welcomed. And it just makes you feel like you could hear a bugle at any moment. And you want to get out there and you want to be in the woods.
My bones hurt just right when it cooled down. It's like it's almost hunting season.
Yeah. Well, with that in mind, I want to talk about the best elk cartridges. It's always a hot topic. It's always every magazine. We're talking about being managing editor of Peterson's Hunting. I bet you go back through the decades of Peterson's Hunting. This has been debated many, many times. So we're going to do our part to continue the debate. But regardless of cartridge and your favorite and then maybe the best elk cartridge, elk hunting in general is not something that you can take as a casual approach like you can with, say, a whitetail or a pronghorn. These are big animals. They're tough animals. They live in some nasty country, and they can take a beating as far as cartridge and bullets go. Colton, I'm sure you've seen some animals that are just hit through the 10 ring, and they suck it up like nothing happened.
Definitely. Yeah, I've seen elk soak up hits through both lungs and go further than they ever should. I've seen one lung hits go for miles. So, yeah, selecting the right cartridge, the right bullet, there's a lot to be said for both of those choices in the ultimate outcome of your elk hunt. Now,
getting into it, as far as the best, I'm going to just word vomit some things here.
Gross.
Yeah, but they are the staples, and it wouldn't be a conversation if we didn't start it with the 300 Win Mag. Colton, is that on your maybe top 5 list of best elk cartridges?
It has to be. Yeah, it's a very venerable cartridge that shoots a heavy enough bullet to put elk down typically in a hurry.
Preston, how you feel about the Win Mag?
You know how I feel about the Win Mag.
Yeah, Preston had one Win Mag, and it was a problem child.
It wasn't accurate. It just, yeah.
You wringed everything you could out of it.
I finally found a load. Now, I wouldn't shoot it at an elk because I ended up having to use a match bullet with a thinner jacket. I don't know, maybe just got it real close to the lands, had to try 19 and 154 different types of powders.
Yep.
But I finally found one oddball that it liked. But yeah, we've beat on it enough. It's just it was made in the time where chambers were looser than they are today. So I kind of had to do things to make it as accurate as I could. But you're not wrong. It's it's a Magnum cartridge sending heavy bullets at high velocity, which can be beneficial, I suppose, on an elk hunt.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah,
I wouldn't know.
Big bullets at high velocity. That sounds like a good combination. And I just feel like when you talk elk, that cartridge is ubiquitous. It comes to mind for every hunter out there. And in your 12 years of guiding, I mean, somebody shows up to camp, they know what they're doing, they're a good shot, they've been practicing, they're in shape, and they have a 300 Win Mag in their hands. It's got to be pretty confidence inspiring for you as a guide.
Yeah, you definitely feel comfortable. I mean, whether we intend to or not, when a hunter shows up in camp, I mean, one of the first things that we're doing is we're trying to assess the variables. You know, what kind of shape are they in? How far can they go? What is their past, hunting capabilities? What's their knowledge base, their skill set, and what rifle have they brought to camp? So, if somebody shows up with a light cartridge, like a 243 or something, and we're going elk hunting, it's going to make me a little bit nervous. I'm not going to tell you it won't kill them. I've seen them kill elk, but that limits our capabilities.
So when somebody shows up into camp, you check their ability, their past hunting experience. Do you have them on the range shooting the guns and showing you what they can do in field positions?
Yep. I mean, the first thing that we do is we'll always, check the rifle off the bench. It's funny. A lot of times people are like, oh, I shot it 2 days ago before I came. Like, I'm good. And I'm like, well, let's go just double check. And it's funny how often we'll go double check and, they're not even hitting a gong at 200 yards off the bench.
Yeah, just for laughs. Let's just see.
Yeah. Just, and I'll always put it on me. Like, I know you can do it, but just let me see what the rifle can do, and
make sure nothing shifted on the way here or something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like in the world of Magnums, and we're going back into the 50s, this would be less of a podcast if the next one we didn't bring up after the 300 Win Mag was the 7 Mag. Is that what do you, I'm putting words in your mouth, Colton. What are in your top 5? But that one for me is right up in there.
It definitely is. And this is going to go back to my personal experience. I would probably put the 7 Mag at number 1.
Right on.
Just because that's what I grew up shooting. That's what I grew up watching my dad shoot. And I've seen a lot of elk die to a bullet fired from a 7 Mag.
That's what I'm saying, Preston.
Well, I guess my question would be these are both Magnum so far.
Yep.
We're starting out a list, or we're going to have to pick one.
Well,
or the internet's
we could
gonna
all
be
probably
bad.
pick one, yeah.
But anyway, they're both Magnum cartridges shooting 60 to 70 grains of powder. How do you feel about that? Let's say it's not a guided hunt and you're not spotting the shot for them. What if it's a lightweight gun, they're in an awkward position, and they have that thing cranked to max magnification and they don't ever see the shot? Is that something that maybe we ought to talk about a little bit? I don't know. Because you as a guide, you're watching the shot for them. What if you're
Correct.
not? What if you weren't there? And we're talking the best elk hunting cartridges, not all guided hunts.
Yeah.
What if you can't see where you hit or missed?
Yeah, 7 Mag gets the advantage over the 300.
Yeah, but they both are Magnums.
That's true.
Something to consider.
But I just think you come back to the baseline of killing capability.
Yeah.
And those Magnum cartridges are just going to kill better.
Yep. We could go bigger from here. Obviously, the 7 Mag, plenty of medicine. Where does the 338 fall into this category? You see many 338 hunters come through. 338 Win Mag, obviously, being the most popular.
Every now and again, we'll see someone bring one of those into camp, but not real common.
Prevalent. Good.
What about recent years? Have you seen more modern cartridges come into camp?
Definitely seeing a lot more modern cartridges, specifically the PRCs. 300 PRC has been a staple in camp since it was introduced. Obviously, the 7 PRC is making big splashes, and the 6.5 PRC as well. We've definitely seen a surge in modern cartridges for good reasons.
I agree. So I was going to go on a more traditional route and then jump into the PRCs, but
I can't help myself.
The 300 PRC, if you're looking for kind of the ultimate elk cartridge,
Elk medicine.
Gosh, I feel like that one should get a heavy nod. That's super long bullets, high sectional density, good velocity, heavy weight, plenty of power, wind cutting ability like nobody's business. I mean, that 300 PRC is a champion.
That's
in my
what
opinion.
That's what I took on my elk hunt.
And
But-
in juxtaposition to that, just like the 300 Win Mag and the 7 Mag, you have the 7 PRC. And I'm not biased when I say this. I'm saying it's got lighter recoil to the tune of like 30% over the 300 Win Mag or a 300 PRC. And then you're actually flattening the trajectory, getting better wind drift, and in my estimation, equally capable of taking an elk.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I've if somebody had to hold a gun to my head right now, said, pick a cartridge, pick a bullet, we're going elk hunting. It would be 7 PRC shooting 160 grain CX. So
On
I
that
didn't
route.
even pay him to say it.
yeah, to show you, how much confidence I have in that setup, I drew an elk tag this year in Wyoming that I've been putting in for 16 years.
Almost half your life.
Yeah, yep. Took a long time to draw. Hopefully be chasing some big bulls, and that's the exact setup I'm taking this fall.
See, you heard it here.
The Hornady Click Adjust Bullet Seating Micrometer. Precisely set bullet seating depth with click adjust in 1/1000th of an inch increments and easy to read graduations. It's a quick and easy way to achieve bench rest accuracy and consistency with tactile clicks, just like a click adjust scope turret. Easily installed on Hornady custom or match grade seating dies. Take your reloading game to the next level with the Hornady Click Adjust Bullet Seating Micrometer.
Well, let's talk about a couple more longtime favorites that maybe aren't new to the scene. I'm talking about the 30-06, the old dirty-06, as it were.
That's been around a minute.
It's been around north of a century now, not a decade, a century.
Probably taken a few elk.
It's taken a few elk, and with all the bullet options in 30 caliber, despite all of this new stuff, which I'm a big fan of, the 30-06 still a viable option when you're in the elk woods, I would say.
It's definitely viable. I might ruffle a few feathers when I say this.
Do it.
And this probably comes back to my own personal experience. I've had, in one season, I had hunters wound 3 different bulls with shooting a 30-06.
Ooh.
And so because of that one season, I have a little bit of a negative bias towards the 30-06 as far as being an elk cartridge. I know it's killed piles of elk, right?
Yep.
I've seen it kill lots of elk. But because of those 3 instances, I am a little jaded towards
Yeah.
the
Well, and
30-06.
as a guide, it's got to hurt. And, let it be known, you're not guiding people on legal bulls, 4 points on a side or something. These are big, majestic, mature bull elk. And not that, a life of an animal is one more powerful than the other,
Right.
but you've spent your days, your weeks, your months leading up to the season scouting all of these places, finding out what's in the herd, where they're at, hiking around, getting them into position. You do all this work, and then to have them wound an elk with a non-lethal shot, pretty frustrating.
It hurts. Well,
Yeah.
and there's a lot to be said, too, that there's a big difference between, quote unquote, a legal bull in Colorado or whatever, like a raghorn, and a 7 to 10-year-old bull, just in their body disposition.
Oh, yeah, the way they...
Those big older bulls are just that much bigger bodied. They're tougher, yada, yada, yada. So
Yep.
that's something to always take into consideration.
Would you have any, when on these, let's say that 1 year that jaded you a little bit on the 30-06, can you pinpoint what the fault was, what the problem was?
No, to be honest. And most of it it falls back on shot selection and shot execution.
Mm.
It's the fault definitely falls on the hunter. I mean, obviously, if you put the bull where it's supposed to, it's going to kill it. However, I don't know the best way to put it, but I would say the fault falls on the hunter.
Sure.
But I was a witness just to what happened, and so 30-06 is jaded in my
Just
eyes
got a nasty,
because of that.
Yeah.
Well, let's continue down that rabbit hole. So we talked about some really good options for the elk hunter. Let's talk about some maybe not so good options, or some options that are fine. They just have a little bit more nuance to them. You just need to, more limitations, or you have to be a little bit more educated and conscientious about what you're doing. Talked about the 30-06. Let's talk about the 270. Obviously, that's taken hundreds or thousands of elk, over the years. I would say, several thousands of elk fall to the hands of a 270, and it's a fine cartridge. Maybe a little on the anemic side. What do you feel about that one?
I mean, again, I've seen a lot of elk shot with the 270. I haven't had any personal bad experiences, so I don't have something bad to say about it.
All right.
But again, I mean, some of the bullets that it's shooting are lighter than what I feel are, authoritative for mature bull elk.
Yeah, all right. Well, now we're going to get real controversial.
So maybe those bullets
Yeah.
just have limitations as far as range and
Yep.
whatever have you, shot placement selection.
We're going to get to it now. I'm going to hit you guys with it. What about elk hunting with the 6.5s? We got a 6.5 Creedmoor, everybody's cartridge that they love to hate. Throw in the 6.5 PRC, the Creedmoor Magnum, if you will. Now, those things remarkably popular throughout the whole country, the world for that matter now, and maybe better suited for some things than others. But a lot of elk fall to these cartridges every year, even despite their 6.5 millimeter, not anything crazy with velocity. A lot of people running shorter barrels suppressed. Again, they're capable. It happens. How do you feel about it? Where does it fall on your list, Colton?
I mean, the 6.5, again, I've seen a lot of bulls fall to the 6.5, whether it be the Creedmoor or the PRC. When shooting those, what I feel like gets people in trouble is that, they'll take those incredibly inherently accurate cartridges to the range. They'll range still at 700, 800 to 1,000 yards. And it instills this confidence of like, I can shoot, basketball at 800 yards. I'm good to shoot an elk that far. And that's where we get in trouble, because I feel like when we're shooting those little bit lighter bullets out of those cartridges, the energy that's lost when you're shooting at those longer ranges is where people run into problems.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think a little bit smaller cartridge, they give you a lot of confidence. I'm right in there. You take your little 6.5 Creedmoor out there, and man, can you make it rain on a range? It's just, you feel like you can't miss. Step up to the PRC, more velocity, flatter trajectory, better in the wind. It does instill some confidence. One of our coworkers, Will, 6.5 PRC, and he clobbered a nice bull elk. I don't know what he scored out, 330, 340 kind of class bull, and old, 7, 8 years old. And
I was in camp when Will shot his bull, and I can't remember what grain, but he was shooting the CX bullet.
Yeah, 130
and
grain.
I saw the video, and he just pancaked that bull.
Yep. So we talked about some good cartridges, maybe some that are not so good, and I feel like there's a whole bunch that are not worth mentioning, like, the 243, 25-06.
Let's not leave the 6.5 yet. People love to hate on it. They really do.
They do.
However, I've, along with Judd, kind of run the Hornady YouTube channel, so it's my kind of job to watch trends and see what's happening within the industry on YouTube. And
sure,
there are some amazing examples out there of what a 6.5 can do on an elk. One example is, I don't know if we need to mention names or anything, but the Hushin channel.
Sure.
Casey's 15-year-old daughter shot a giant elk at, I think, 400 or 450 yards, and that thing was down in 5 seconds. Like, watched it all happen. So that's a great example of it within its capabilities. When that bullet is still expanding, it has enough velocity to do its job, it does well. But I've also seen videos of people taking shots at elk with 800 yards, 900 yards with a 6.5 Creedmoor, and if you run the calculations on that, that bullet is at the ragged edge of doing its intended job. So just like you said, Colton, you have to live within limitations if you're going to choose something like that. I love it because I can shoot it in awkward positions and still see where the bullet goes, and I can handle it well, but you have to know its capabilities.
Well, and I think part of that falls into shot placement as well. If you're going to shoot a little bit lighter cartridge with a little bit lighter bullet, you probably shouldn't be shooting animals on the shoulder, which I personally prefer. I always settle my crosshairs on the shoulder. Um, However, if you're shooting, especially at a little bit longer distances, you got to think about your penetration on the shoulder versus behind the shoulder. So, I mean, there's so many factors that have to be taken into consideration when you're shooting these, quote unquote lighter cartridges for big game like elk.
Yeah, and you have to take bullet construction into play
Yeah.
too. A 143 ELD-X versus a 130 CX are going to act like two different bullets because they are.
They
really are.
Absolutely. I feel like more, over cartridge selection and our best or our favorite cartridges, probably a more refined answer would be, your favorite bullet for a given caliber. A lot of elk are fallen dropped every year with a 30 caliber or a 7mm, and some, more now with 6.5 than ever. And there's different bullet options in there that can expand your horizons, if you will. You look at a 300 Win Mag, for example, one of the most iconic elk cartridges, and it's got some limitations with head height, which is the distance from the case mouth to how far you can load a bullet out and still feed it in the magazine. So that distance dictates what kind of bullet you can shoot, and you lose a little bit there versus something like a 300 PRC. So you have to live with those limitations of the ogive. How long can that be? How slipstream is it? What's it do in the wind? And ultimately the muzzle velocity, because that bullet starts to get pushed deeper and deeper into the case, take up your powder capacity. You're not getting as much muzzle velocity. So how far do you want to shoot? And you have to have a bullet that works within that range.
Yeah. And you could probably all start, and probably, Colton, you could touch on this a little bit too, but we always like to define the job first. What does the job require to do? And then we start working backwards from there. Okay, what bullet can do that job? How fast do I need to push that bullet? Well, that chooses my cartridge for me.
Yeah, that is the backwards approach seems to work pretty well.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to put like a thumb on an exact number of like what foot-pounds does it take to kill? How many feet per second does the bullet need to be going? Based on personal experience, if I was shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor at something like a mature bull elk, I would keep my shot distance like 350 yards and in and shoot them behind the shoulder. I think you'd be just fine with that. With the 6.5 PRC, I think you can step that out to 500 yards. But past that, yes. I mean, yeah, you mentioned YouTube. Hop on YouTube and you'll see people shooting elk with those cartridges beyond those distances. That's just flirting with fire.
Yep.
In my opinion, if I had to pick, I would say pick a bullet that is 160 grains or heavier. That's going to get you ample penetration, and run with that regardless of cartridge choice.
Yeah, that's probably key, is regardless of cartridge choice, pick the bullet to do the job. Now, Hornady's got a lot of bullets that'll do the job based upon what you're after and what limitations you're facing. You look at our iconic interlock bullet. That's the bullet that really started it all for us. Our first hunting bullet was that Spire point. And those bullets are incredibly effective in the right caliber and the right bullet weight out to, those 300, 350 yard line. They can be really effective, a traditional cup and core bullet. Then you get into ELD-X and CX, which I feel like are our two flagship type of bullets for elk hunting, and worldly different. Now, with some of our newer CXs, we've kind of blurred the line a little bit, but they are definitely different bullets that react differently.
Yeah, and Colton, you mentioned, I think if you had to pick one, it'd probably be a 7 PRC 160 CX, and I'm assuming that you like that CX maybe for a little bit of assurance and ruggedness, maybe not the ideal perfectly broadside shot. Those don't always happen. Maybe talk to that a little bit as far as a CX for your go-to for this 16-year hunt.
Yeah, the CX. I mean, and I'm not saying this as that the ELD-X is not fully capable. I've literally seen dozens and dozens of big bulls hit the dirt being hit with an ELD-X. It does the job very well. The reason that I prefer the CX has to do with two things. Number one, I like having two holes. When I'm following a blood trail, I just like to have two holes. And the second being that my shot placement, as I mentioned earlier, I shoot animals on the shoulder. I want to break them down. And that CX is just a little bit more built, going to pack that more punch to break both shoulders. That ELD-X, I've seen them break both shoulders. I'm not going to say they won't, but that CX is just going to give you that extra punch, whether that be at a weird angle, like you mentioned. You get caught in the timber and you're looking at a bull that's you've called in quartering to you at 40 yards. That CX is going to punch in front to back, where the ELD-X at that distance, you're going to get more expansion than I would probably like.
Yeah. So the CX averaging probably 95 to 99% weight retention. Most of the time it's the tip that's missing, whereas an ELD-X on average probably 70% weight retention.
Yep.
Maybe a little bit less up close, maybe a little bit more at distance. So it's really, again, choosing how you like a bullet to perform. We've got two options, two really good options for you. And the interlock lives in there too at 70%.
Absolutely. Yeah, and there needs to just be more hunter education. And I feel like with, obviously, publications like Peterson's Hunting, and then all of the stuff available out there from other media outlets, our friends in the industry that do podcasts and do a YouTube channel and all those things, there's more information out there for the average hunter than there was 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago. I mean, there was just a small echo chamber. And now I feel like there's more resources for somebody to get educated. And it really starts and ends with educate yourself, just like you mentioned. Find a bullet that performs the way you expect. Because if a bullet performs outside of your expectations, but your expectations weren't aligned with reality, then that's not necessarily the bullet's fault.
Yep.
And the CX, that copper zinc alloy, it does a phenomenal job. Like you mentioned, in and out, usually, great blood trail, profuse hemorrhaging, just incredible penetration, both shoulder blades. It's really one of the more universal bullets out there. If you need to get a bullet in an animal and you want to count on one, man, that CX is one. One of the corollaries, though, because it is so tough, it requires just a little bit more speed to make it work. Preston, you talked about making a bullet work. Well, bullets work because of velocity, and the CX just needs more of it.
Yep, it is because it's a robust bullet. We're looking, with a couple of exceptions, at 2,000 feet per second across the board to make those things open up, compared to an interlock, which is 1,800, compared to an ELD-X, which is 1,600.
Yeah, so that extra speed is needed, and so when you pair a CX bullet up with a Magnum cartridge, or perhaps our Superformance line of ammo that has that higher muzzle velocity, now you're in there. That stuff is bad medicine. Now
you're cooking with gas, I think they say.
The ELD-X to cooking with Crisco.
Yeah.
The ELD-X comparatively, that one is a very unique bullet in the market because it was designed to work at closer ranges, at those traditional moderate ranges, and then also expand uniformly, reliably at those extended ranges when velocity has bled off a little bit. Now, I don't think anybody should be in the business of purposefully selecting longer range shots, but sometimes if that's what you get, that's what you got to take. And the ELD-X was designed to give that match grade accuracy with the long range capability as well as the close range terminal performance as well. And as far as a bullet goes, man, that's a tough one to beat.
Yep, I agree.
I mean, I'd agree with that too. It's funny. I'm just trying to think back, some of the bulls that I've seen shot with that ELD-X, and I would say more often than not, shots are in that 200 to 400 yard range on the ranch that I guide on, and more often than not, we are recovering that bullet tucked right underneath the offside shoulder or hide on the offside. And that's exactly what that bullet's made to do. I mean, it is dumping 100% of its energy into it, driving all the way through. I mean, you can't ask for much more than that.
No, you really can't. Find the latest shirts, hats, hoodies, and accessories that you see here on the podcast and much more at HornadyGear.com. what I really like now in 2024 and beyond, well, starting a couple years ago, actually, traditionally, what was the GMX, was our monolithic bullet, was traditional bullet shapes. Traditional ogives, traditional boat tails, just a traditional shape. And they performed really well. Well, we refined that bullet into what is the CX, and we found some ways to lower the drag. So if you lower the drag, you increase the amount of velocity retention across all ranges. And then we went through and we chicken hawked a couple bullets, and we absolutely revolutionized monolithic bullet performance. I'm talking about the 190 grain 30 caliber, the 160 grain 7 millimeter, the 130 in 6.5, and the 90 grain bullet in 6 millimeter. And what we did with those bullets is we have designed cartridges that push the envelope of performance, and they have all the head height and the twist rate and all the powder capacity we need to be a truly precision rifle cartridge at the edge of performance. But we didn't have a monolithic bullet that really supported them. So for the 300 PRC, that 190 grain bullet is huge. Super long ogive, long boat tail.
A juggernaut, you might say.
It's a juggernaut. Same thing with the 160 and 7 millimeter, like you talked about, Colton. The 130 in 6.5 and that 90 grain in 6 millimeter. What we did with all of those bullets is we modeled them in their shape off of the heavier match bullets that are available in that caliber class. So if you look at something like the 160 CX in 7 millimeter, that bullet has a near identical shape to the 180 ELD match, which is arguably one of the most efficient bullets that we manufacture. So you get all the shape, and shape has a lot to say about the bullet's drag. And again, you lower the drag, you increase velocity retention. So now we're at an area where we have monolithic bullet performance, but higher velocity retention, and all of those slipstream design attributes that we want in a match bullet available in a monolithic. And that really does sound like a perfect combination for an elk bullet. Yep.
Definitely. It's funny. I have not had the opportunity to personally shoot a bull elk with those 160 CXs yet. However, I've now taken those bullets to Africa twice, one of which you were there.
Yeah.
And we shot sable, blue wildebeest, waterbuck, gemsbuck. We're talking big plains game animals that rival the size of a mature bull elk. Shooting them with those 160 grain CXs, those were bad medicine on those bigger animals.
They were. And I'll say, on a personal note, I was dyed-in-the-wool ELD-X through and through. And I still love a good ELD-X lead core bullet. We came back from that trip, and I said, when I come back here with my 7 PRC, I'm bringing the 160 CX. And not that I lost any animals, not that we had any crazy long tracking jobs, because there were 2 animals I took right off their feet with it. But there was just something different. The way they reacted to that bullet, the audible sound when that bullet...
That's what I was just going to say.
It was remarkable. There was no question when you hit one.
Yep.
It's like a sledgehammer hitting concrete.
Yeah, or a wet hand high-fiving a cinder block wall.
Yeah, something like that.
It was remarkable. So,
well, we've departed a little bit from cartridges.
Yeah, well, I wanted to bring it back, not to cartridges and not to bullets, but to the real thing that matters. And we've talked about it a couple times already. Cartridges, great. Calibers, great. Bullets, even better. The real number one, the real king of killing elk is hitting them in the pump house. That's fair to say.
Wholeheartedly.
You can kill anything with anything in the right spot.
Yep. But what's funny is how true that is. There's still a very, there's always a strong debate of, do you shoot them on the shoulder or behind the shoulder?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a wrong answer.
Situation dependent.
Right. But I can tell you, based on my personal experiences and seeing, I was trying to think. I think I've seen between 200 and 300 bulls hit the dirt.
That's a little bit.
I'm not sure I've seen 200 or 300 bulls.
I guarantee
certainly not while hunting.
Yeah, so I have a fairly large sample size to draw my opinions from, and bulls are so strong. I've seen them go a long ways on a shot behind the shoulder through both lungs.
Sure.
I want those animals broken down. I do not want to have to track them. I want shoulders to break. And so I always tell my hunters to shoot them right on the shoulder.
Yep.
And so that's my personal opinion. But again, we come back to, okay, if you don't have an adequate bullet or an adequate cartridge that is made to punch through both shoulders, you're going to be better off to shoot them behind the shoulder. So there's some variables to consider there, but I can tell you, all things equal, I tell my hunters to shoot them on the shoulder every time.
Yep. It's a hard habit to break once you start shoulder shooting. I'm in that camp as well. And when I was talking through the pump house, I meant in the vitals. Like, you can't shoot one in the guts. You can't shoot one
Jaden
high and
always
outside.
says, let's see, you could probably kill an elephant with a 17 if it was put in the right spot, but you can't shoot deer in the hoof with like a 338 Lapua and expect it to die.
Yeah, that's true. And what I was getting at was, all this debate aside, shot placement is always king. It seems to be that you have to make a lethal shot. And there's some things that'll give you a little bit of leverage, a little bit of leeway, a little bit of insurance, but nothing beats a well-placed shot.
Yep. And I mean, you think about I'm preaching that we should be shooting those heavier bullets. If you're someone who suffers bad from flinching or due to recoil or whatever, and you can't handle those bigger cartridges, and you're more comfortable shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor, that's fine as long as you understand your limitations. Because I'd rather someone that can shoot a 6.5 Creedmoor and hit a softball at 300 yards than have someone shoot a 300 Win Mag. They're going to flinch, and they're lucky to hit, a beach ball at 300 yards. So, like you said, it comes back to that shot placement. There's a lot of factors to consider, but that's definitely number one. You got to be able to put it where it's supposed to, regardless of what you're shooting.
Utilize your space your way with the modular Hornady Security Square Lock Organizing System. Mount the Square Lock panels anywhere in your home or shop. Then attach the wide assortment of Square Lock accessories to securely store firearms, tools, gear, or any other valuables in any possible configuration. Keep your reloading bench or gun room organized with the Square Lock Modular Organizing System from Hornady Security.
All right, so now it's time for the cutting. Start with Preston. Preston, if you got to pick the best elk cartridge, and then the best is always arguable. If you had to pick for you give me an elk cartridge because you're going on an elk hunt, what's Preston Limp for taking? Walk us through it.
So I've been elk hunting one time.
Yeah, I was there. It was
Colton,
great.
you're supposed to be there. But anyway.
We had a great time.
You were busy. I get it.
I melted my socks by a fire.
He did. I had to borrow my socks. But anyway, we did see a nice bull day before season. I took a 300 PRC. I did.
Okay.
When I got home from that hunt, though, after having done that, I put my 7 PRC barrel back on that rifle.
Okay.
Mainly because the 300 PRC is a big cartridge with a lot of powder, and I just got Thunder Beast Ultra 5, which is a wonderful, wonderful hunting suppressor. I think really as far as you want to go down, I think they said you could do 20 on it. I'm pretty sure, but the shortest 300 PRC barrel I have is 22 inches, and I want something super, super packable and relatively lightweight. And the 7 is going to give me that recoil that I want with that can, and I'm able to do it with a 20-inch barrel. That's my reasoning.
So you're taking the 7. You taking ELD-X's? You taking the CX?
Probably 175 ELD-X's.
Good plan.
And I have nothing against CX's. I've shot a few critters with it. Nothing against it. I just like an ELD-X.
All right. That's a good answer. And controversial if you know Preston at all.
Yeah, I love to hate the 7 PRC.
Yeah.
Only because he loves it so much.
7mm man bun. And it does get a lot of good love, and for good reason. But I see the justification of the 300 PRC, where if you were trying to say this one's the best, if that was your only pursuit in life was to shoot elk, man, a 300 PRC with either that 190 CX or the 212 ELD-X, you have no range limitations, no shot placement limitations. I mean, you have the ultimate 30 cal Magnum to shoot elk, and that is tough. But just like you
Well,
said,
you make me toss a coin, and that's what
where I was going with that was that's not the only side to the coin, because you have to pack that rifle, you have to shoot that rifle, you have to train with that rifle, you have to try to spot your own impacts with that rifle, you have to do follow-up shots with that rifle. And so the best cartridge might not be the most terminally effective cartridge, might be a blend of shootability and terminal performance. And for me,
I guess that's what I did.
that's exactly right. And so, not surprisingly, if I was going on an elk hunt this year, I would be taking my 7 PRC. And depending on where I was hunting, would make the choice between CX and ELD-X. Obviously, some of those units, you're ended up pounding in the timber, whether you want to or not, and you could end up face-to-face with an elk. Some of those bigger fields and meadows, maybe that ELD-X would be a little bit better to air something out if you had to. But man, that 7 PRC for me, again, I can handle the recoil. I can shoot off a tripod, which is a big one for me. I can spot shots better. I can follow up faster. To me, it's just the right balance. So, 12-year guide, managing editor of Peterson's Hunting. I don't want to pigeonhole you, but you knew I was going to ask. If you had an elk hunt tomorrow and you had a safe full of guns and ammo, what's your go-to for elk?
I think I hit on it a little bit earlier, but
I was giving you an opportunity to balk on that if you wanted.
Well, but I wouldn't. I mean, an elk hunt like the one I've got this fall that's got that much kind of writing on it, 16 years worth of waiting, anticipating.
And
I'm going to take whatever, and just cost. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take the gun that I feel 100% the most confident in, both in my ability to shoot it and in its ability to kill what it's being shot at. So, I mean, I've got Springfield's new Model 2020 Boundary.
Yeah,
is the rifle I'm going to be taking, and I mean, it shoots those 160 grain CXs about 3/4 MOA.
For a factory rifle with factory ammo in a big Magnum, you can't ask a whole lot more.
That's my thoughts exactly. So, I mean, I still got to do my job. Hopefully we can turn up a big bull, but I've got all the confidence that when it's time for that bullet to do what it's supposed to, that elk's toast.
I love it. I love the confidence. I love the story.
God, we all said the same thing.
I know.
Boring.
No one's controversial. Well,
hey, I was controversial by saying I don't like the 30-06.
Yeah, that's true.
You're going to get some hate for that.
We're going to get some great commentary on the 6.5 talk. But, to go back to that 6.5 real quick, our coworker Will, Preston, you dressed up that gun.
Yeah, made sure he was dialed in.
6.5
off profile, set up real nice.
130 grain CXs. And I saw the video. He thumped that elk. Didn't know what hit him. That first shot knocked him off his feet, and he hit him again before he got back up. And it wasn't a chip shot. I mean, it was cross canyon a little bit. I don't think it was super far, but
I think it was in the 300 to 400 yard range.
Yeah. And it absolutely hammered him.
CX hammers.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. But
let's play a little bit of devil's advocate. What do you guys think would have happened if he'd have been shooting the ELD-X? Think that bull would have pancaked the same way?
I think it probably wouldn't have had an exit, but I think that bull would have been knocked off its feet.
Yeah, I think you could speak to this more than anybody, Colton, and in my experience as well. I think the animal's current mental state at the time of being shot also has something to do with its reaction to the shot. Not always, and it's not a guarantee, but you get an animal head down feeding, and it just gets walloped by a 6.5 PRC right through the shoulder. Yeah, I don't think versus something that's alert, in tune, heart of the rut, chasing stuff all around or something like that. Yeah, maybe they react a little differently.
I'd agree with that.
Well, and if either one of those bullets jostles the central nervous system, it's going down,
Yeah, the key with the elk, though, you can interrupt that electrical activity. Will go down, and then they'll get right back up. They are, yeah, I bet you have. They're incredibly tough to kill. Their tenacity to live is
a lot of blood volume,
unrivaled on this continent, really, as far as I can tell. I haven't shot every animal on this continent, but from what I've witnessed and from who I've talked to, the elk ranks right up there towards the top.
For sure. And real quick, I want to touch on something. You mentioned when Will shot that bull, he dropped, he pancaked, and before he could get back up, he shot him again. There's a valuable lesson to learn there. And that's because when someone shoots an animal and it drops, oftentimes they've shocked the spinal cord or the neck, and it gives the hunter a false sense of success. They saw that animal drop, they're jacked up, and what do they do? What's the animal do when the hunter's celebrating? Gets back up and runs away. I tell my hunters, if that animal drops and you can see him, whether you think you drilled him through the shoulders or not, I want you to shoot him again. I want you to anchor him to the ground because I've seen it happen it seems like it happens once or twice a year. I mean, I've seen it happen many, many, many times where an animal will drop, people get excited, and then the animal gets up and run away, and you got a rodeo on your hands. So regardless of what cartridge, what bullet, what animal you're shooting, if they drop and you can see them, please shoot them again.
Yeah, that's sage advice.
And you'll save yourself from yourself sometimes, and hunting elk is not inexpensive.
No.
I went over the counter elk hunting last year and spent over $1,000 on the trip, so
oh yeah,
it's
easy.
not inexpensive.
No, we bootstrapped it.
People argue like, oh, well, you're going to ruin some meat. Okay, you're going to ruin a little bit of meat, but what if that animal gets up and runs away and you get nothing?
And you ruin all of it.
Yeah, and nobody, I'm a rodeo fan, but I'm not down for a rodeo in the elk
I love
woods.
westerns, but I don't want things to get too western.
Yeah, right.
I've seen that come back and bite people so many times that that cannot be stressed enough. And especially with something like an elk, they're so big, they're so tough. Even with a good shot, please shoot them again.
Yep. Yeah. Do your due diligence. Do your homework. Educate yourself. Know your capabilities. Know the capability of your bullet. Do that elk a favor. Do yourself a favor. Make a good shot. Make the right cartridge and bullet selection. Make a good shot. And then follow that shot right up with another one.
Yep.
I think we should leave it at that.
243?
No, not the 243.
You I
got
just wanted to
anything
bring
else?
it up again.
Yeah.
That's all. No, Colton, I really appreciate you coming on this one. This is to hear somebody talk that's seen 200 to 300 elk go down is just, it doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, us prairie boys can talk all day till we're blue in the face about it, but we have not seen.
I can tell you about whitetails if you want me to.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah. I tell you about hunting whitetails in the sandhills, though.
Yeah, that's a little bit more fun.
Yeah, it is.
And mule deer.
Yeah, Colton's done it.
Yep.
Great stuff. Colton, do you have anything to add on best elk cartridge, elk hunting in general? Anything you want to leave the listeners with?
No, man, I think you hit the nail on the head. Regardless of your cartridge, make sure you're shooting a properly constructed bullet. Know your limitations and stay within them. You'll be just fine.
That's what I like to hear. Well, Preston, Colton, thanks for coming on the show.
You bet.
Thanks, fellas.
Guys, hopefully you enjoyed this episode with Colton Hewitt, managing editor at Peterson's Hunting. It was educational. I learned a lot. I enjoyed talking about this stuff. It's almost elk season. If you have a tag, good luck this fall, and we'll catch you on the next one.